a little bit off its lows of the day, down to almost minus 1,100 on the day, now down about 970. Hopefully a little recovery will be good here. We do not want to close over 1,000 down today. It'll send off all kinds of signals on electronic trading programs around the country, around the world in particular. That 1,000 is a big number. 1175 down day is the biggest ever in the last 3 years. So we'll keep our eyes peeled for that stuff. And while all the Democratic political candidates are out there not mentioning the economy, they're out there talking about free health care, free tuition, and free everything, cashless bail, and let all the immigrants in, let all the criminals out of jail. The one thing that Donald Trump keeps pounding the drum on is the economy. And to break that down for us, our good friend Fernando Uribe is here. He's the host of Politically Direct on Insider NJ, faculty member at Bergen Community College, and here for us whenever we ask him to be here. Fernando, thank you so much.
Thanks, Sean.
So this recent article from Bloomberg, actually, that the Trump effect on the economy,
of all places,
is undeniable.
Yes.
So what gives here?
Well, it's interesting, John, and again, thanks for having me back. And when I saw this article on Bloomberg News over the weekend, it was really sort of startling for me because I wouldn't think that this online publication would give the president this sort of credit. And one of the things that, I'll give you some facts to sort of unpackage this, one of the interesting dynamics about the Trump economy where a lot of Democrats and liberals say, well, he's just sort of riding the coattails of Barack Obama. That's not necessarily so. And because we have to remember that in 2017, the president helped pass the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, which consequently had two dynamics for the economy. Number one, it was helping more and more businesses sort of create investment and thus for creating jobs. And then secondly, by doing that, you're putting more money into the pockets of consumers and taxpayers. And that just has a cyclical effect, John. And for the most part, Democrats, as you mentioned before, they're into their identity politics, they're into sort of like their woke culture, but the economy is really what's working right now for the president. And not just for him, but for a lot of incumbents, both that are seeking House seats and also Senate seats, John. And I think that the economy right now seems to be the biggest sort of parameter that the president can really ride into this election season. We don't have a Democratic nominee yet, but whoever it's going to be, the president's going to struggle, I think, in the sense of making sure that Democrats don't get their message out.
So when you talk about this, new left-wing talking point that Trump's really riding Obama's economy, right?
That's not true.
In the morning, when I get up, I put on Morning Joe. I actually put on MSLSD, and I watch it to get my juices flowing. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
To listen to the lies. I call Morning Joe Morning Joke, because it's really a joke how they manipulate the facts. And they have this guy, Steve Ratner, on there, right? And he was like, a Treasury official. He got this huge fine from the Securities and Exchange Commission for doing all kinds of, illicit things. He runs a boatload of dough now for Mike Bloomberg, which they just recently disclosed. And he puts up these charts saying how actually Obama's job growth was bigger than Trump. And one of the things they do with the sleight of hand on those left-wing channels is they put up his numbers from 2011 to the end of his term, right? The 2010 to the end of his term. And over those 6 years, he had 201,000 jobs. And they say Trump only had 180. But what people forget is he shed more jobs than anyone in his first 2.5 years. And when you take his whole 8 years, he only created 102,000 jobs every month as compared to Trump's 180. So when you get to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is the governmental agency that covers this stuff, you take Obama's 8 years and you divide them, all the jobs created monthly, divide by 8, it's 102. And if you take Trump up to date, he's at average 180,000. So Trump's doing 80% better than Obama on jobs.
Absolutely. And again, we go back to the Tax Cut and Jobs Act when we look at the fact that it produced a long-term incentive for businesses to create investment. And that means creating more jobs and keeping people employed. And again, John, when it comes to what's going to happen later this fall, whether it's Bernie Sanders, whether it's Elizabeth Warren, whether it's Mike Bloomberg, these Democrats have to give, listen, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, California, this is red meat. Like, their rhetoric is red meat. Democrats have to try to win over moderate voters in the Midwest and in the South, and they're not going to do that with these outrageously expensive programs that they're recommending. Free tuition, whether it's free healthcare for illegals or free healthcare overall. John, these are very expensive programs. It's not to say that healthcare isn't important in this country. Of course it is. But the idea that what are these programs going to cost? And when none of the candidates can give us at least anywhere near a ballpark figure of what it's going to cost taxpayers, that's a concern. Because when have you ever heard of a government program coming in under budget? I have yet to hear about it.
Never happens. The worst thing you could do is put the government in control of anything, because as soon as the government runs it, you know it's going to be as inefficient and as corrupted as possible. Look at the post office. Here in New York, you had the Off-Track Betting Corp, which the government took over, and the government in New York actually went out of business running a gambling operation, which, you know, many lesser organizations have done profitably for years and years and years. But today, Fernando, Dow down, you know, almost 1,000 points, as I mentioned, coming in. Does the stock market itself have a real definitive correlating effect to Trump's reelection?
I think it will, but at the same time, it's about job creation, John. It's about the idea that so many sectors in the United States, not just in like sort of metropolises like New York and let's say California, right? It's about sort of Midwestern and Southern states having a lot of job growth, especially in the manufacturing industry. Listen, these trade agreements that the president has made with China and the recent one with Canada and Mexico, this is going to bring back well over 250,000 new jobs in the next cycle, in the next presidential term. These are numbers that are irrefutable. And again, Democrats and liberals want to sort of espouse these narratives about programs and what's good for the the collective population, and I get it. Feel-good programs are nice, but it's not feel-good when you're using other people's money. And when you have to come up with a cost and how to pay for these programs, and you don't have one, and you hear just crickets, that's a concern, John.
So, Donald Trump, I love watching his debates, and I love watching his rallies. He's going crazy and everything. And I always say, like, you can't write. We don't even need writers. You just put him on because But talking about, Bernie Sanders and this socialism stuff, and Trump, I think, summed it up really good. Schmuck. No, he was talking about Tom Steyer there. But I think, Fernando, our last minute here, if Bernie Sanders' momentum continues and he knocks out Joe Biden in South Carolina here, I think we're going to see, the ultimate fight, a binary fight, right? Trump capitalism versus Bernie Sanders socialism. And I think capitalism wins that fight every day.
And it's funny about Bernie Sanders supporters, especially online, where they're the first one to talk about their candidate as, well, he's not someone that sort of endorses any sort of authoritarian regimes. But you hear that in his rhetoric. And again, John, it's how do you pay for these programs? Feel-good programs are wonderful. Yes, you're a humanitarian, I'm a humanitarian. We believe in being humane. But how do you pay for this? Nobody wants to pay more taxes for programs that, guess what, is going to balloon the deficit, is going to balloon the federal budget. And no offense, I'm sorry, Bernie supporters, you have to give me concrete numbers. And somewhere, somehow, you might have failed Econ 101 at some point in your adult lives. Either retake the course or just read up on it.
Well, he's not only a TV political commentator, he's also a professor and faculty member at Bergen Community College. So you guys might want to get back in your Econ 101. Fernando, thank you so much, brother.
Thank you, John. Really
appreciate it. We're going to keep you posted on everything that's going on in the markets. And you're watching Liquid Lunch on Newsmax TV. Keep it right here. Lots of stuff going on, especially gold rising in the face of this market collapse today. Derek Scott from metals.com always comes on with us when stuff's happening in the metals markets. He's going to be with us next right here on Newsmax TV.